In this video, there's a few small changes that I want to make, and then I'm going to talk about how we could refactor this a little bit. So the first change is that when we win this game, so let's win here. There we go. And I get this correct message, and I click on play again. It still says correct, and we want that to reset, which is a really quick change. All we need to do is find the code that runs when we click on play again. Then we need to change the span that we have here and make it just empty. So let's go find that, make this full screen. So when we click on that reset button, which is right here, all we need to do is change our display, which we called message display. So we'll do that down here, just anywhere. Message display dot text, text content equals empty string. And let's see how that goes. Refresh. Okay, let's just click until we win. Okay, so it says correct here. And if I click on play again, that goes away. The other slight change that I want to make is that this button should only say play again once the user wins. So I'll refresh the page and it says new colors, which is how we want it to work. Then if I win, it asks me if I want to play again. And then if I click play again, we want to change the button text to go back to new colors. So really slight difference, but I only want to show play again if the user just won. So we'll go into our code and we need to find the place where the user wins the game, which is right here. When the user clicks on the picked color, so when the user clicks on the right color, we change the reset button text to say text content. But then what we want to do is when the user clicks on the reset button, we're going to change that, this dot text content, to go back to new colors. And we could also write reset button, but it's easier to do this because we're inside of the event listener for reset button. And that should be good. If we refresh, click until we get the right one. Do we want to play again? Sure. Now it goes back to new colors. And every time it just says new colors over and over. And if I win, it's the only time that it says play again. So one really minor thing, but I find it really distracting, is that when I click on one of these buttons, it has this annoying outline around it. And this is actually our browser doing that, and we can turn that off. I don't know if you can see that on the screencast, but there's a blue outline. It's pretty obnoxious. So to get rid of that, we go to our style sheet, and if we select our buttons, just down here, we can just write outline none, and go back, and refresh. And now if we click, we don't get that blue outline around it. So that's all I wanted to do for the game logic. Now I want to spend a little bit of time refactoring our code. So let's go back. The first thing that jumps out to me is this code here, where we have a hard button and an easy button and a listener for each one. And they're very similar in how they work, except one of them will work with 3 squares, the other one works with 6. But otherwise they do basically the same thing. So we can actually reduce that duplication. And rather than giving each one an ID, what we're going to do is get rid of those IDs and give them a class. And they're going to share the same class. So the class is going to be called mode. So we'll give them class mode. Remember, a button or any item can have 2 classes. They just need to be separated by spaces. So this has class mode and class selected. Okay, so now we'll go and delete these 2 buttons here and make a list of buttons called mode buttons, and that's going to be a document.querySelector all dot mode. So that gives us 2 buttons. Then we're going to loop through mode buttons. So we need for var I equals 0, I is less than mode buttons dot length. And what this also will let us do is if in the future we want to add a medium or normal difficulty mode or a super hard difficulty mode, we don't have to add extra listeners because we're selecting all of them and then using a loop. Versus here, we have to manually write one for every button that we add. Okay, so finish the loop here, I++. And what we're going to do is add a mode buttons I dot add event listener. Click. And we'll just leave it at this for now. Before we go any further, I'm actually going to comment out this code just so that we can tell what's running from our new code. And what we want to happen when we click on one of those buttons, the first thing we want to happen is for that selected class to be applied. So right now it's only when we hover we get that color. I want it to be when we click. So we need to do a this dot class list dot add selected, just like that, which is what we have down here, except we're doing it to easy button and hard button. We can just do it to this, which refers to what was clicked on. The only issue is we need to turn it off the original one as well. And to do that, we're just going to hard code this a bit and write mode buttons 0 dot class list dot remove selected, and then we'll remove it from the other one as well. So because there's only 2 buttons, this isn't an issue. What we're doing is removing it from both buttons just to be safe, and then adding it to the one that we just clicked on. So now if we test this out and refresh, you can see that it only is added to the one that we just clicked on, and it's removed from the other one. So what we need to do next is add the bulk of the logic here for these buttons. So we need to figure out how many squares to show, pick new colors, and then we need to pick a new picked color, which is the color we're trying to click on. And then lastly, we want to update page to reflect changes. So to do all of this, I'm actually going to make a new function. And that function, I'm just going to call it reset. And this is something we're going to use in a few places because we're repeating these steps a lot, picking new colors, picking a new picked color from the colors array, and then updating the page to show the new colors and updating this display here. We're doing that all the time. So I'm going to just put that all in a function. So what we need to do inside this function is, I'm actually just going to copy it from down here. We've already done this here. I'm just going to copy all this into our reset, just like that. And let's take a look at what's happening. So inside of reset, we're generating the random colors depending on the num squares variable. And then we're picking a new color. We're changing the color displays content. We have this.text content equals new colors, and that actually won't work because this used to be referring to the reset button, and that was inside the event listener for reset button. We're now inside of a separate function called reset, so we need to hard code that as reset button. And then we're changing the message display to be empty. And then we're looping through all the squares and we're updating their color. And then we're changing the background of the H1 back to this blue. And if we just call that instead of here, if we just run reset, there's one small problem, which is that we're never updating num squares. So when I click on the easy button, we want to change the num squares variable to be 3. When I click on the hard button, we want to change it to be 6. So to do that, I'm going to go right here and add an if statement. And all we can do is write if this.text content, so the button that was clicked on, if the text content is equal to easy, what we're going to do is say num squares is equal to 3, else num squares is equal to 6, and then we'll call the reset function, which will use the num squares. As you can see here in our reset function, we're using num squares to call our generate random colors function. So we need to have num squares updated, which we're doing right here. There's actually a shorter way of writing this that some people are big fans of. It's called the ternary operator. So I'm going to write it first, and then I'll talk about how it works. So this.text content equals easy question mark num squares equals 3 colon num squares equals 6. So this one line here does the exact same thing as these 4 lines right here, these 5 lines. So it's called the ternary operator. There are 3 parts to it. The first thing is the condition. So you can read this as if this.text content is equal to easy, then num squares is equal to 3. Otherwise, num squares is equal to 6. So it's just a way of writing this. And I'll keep it like this. Usually, if we just have quick one-line if statements where we're setting one value to 2 different possible options, it's a good use case for the ternary operator. We still have a problem though, which is we're never actually hiding or showing the correct number of squares. So what will happen if I refresh, we start on hard mode, that works fine. Everything works the same. If I click on easy though, we still have 6 squares here. And you'll see the bottom 3 just don't change color because we only generated 3 colors. So what we need to do inside of our reset function, we need to account for that. So right here inside of this loop, where we're changing the color of the squares to match the color from the colors array, if there's only 3 items in the colors array, what we actually need to do is hide the other 3 squares. So I'm going to write that with an if statement, and I'm just going to check if there is a color to paint, else we'll do something else. So if there is a color, we're going to paint or change the background color of squares I to be that color. Otherwise, we need to change squares I dot display to be none, and that needs to be style dot display, just like that. And so that will then hide it for us. So what happens if I click on the easy button? I have an array of colors with 3 items. We're looping through 6 squares, and we're checking if there is a color that matches that square. And for the first 3, there will be, so we set the background color to be the color from the array. But the last 3, colors I is going to be null, or actually it'll be undefined. There won't be a color there. So that is false. And what happens is then we set the display to be none. So I'll show you how that works. Refresh. If I click on easy, the bottom 3 disappear. Keep clicking on easy, we get 3 new colors. Let's play the game. There we go. We do have a problem though, which is if I click on hard, we're changing all 6 squares to have a new background color, but we're not unhiding the bottom 3. What I'll do to get around that is right before we give a new background color to the squares, I'm going to go ahead and re-show them. So it's going to be squares I dot style dot display equals block. So that's how we bring them back. And we're just going to do that to all 6. It's not a big deal. So if we give them a background color, we're just going to always make sure that they're visible first. So now if we refresh and I go to easy, we have 3, play a game, I click on hard, now we get 6 colors. Let's play a game. There we go. Click on easy, and we go back to 3. All right, so you can see we cleaned up a lot of code here. This used to be a lot longer. It was like 3 times long at least, and 2 different click listeners. And now our code is relatively versatile. If we wanted to add a medium difficulty button, all we need to do is change this line here where we would have another num squares. Maybe we want 5 squares, or we want a super difficult level where we have 10 squares. We just need to change num squares and call our reset function again. The next place that we can use our reset function is actually when we click on the reset button. So all that we need to do there is replace everything inside of the reset button click listener with just reset, just like that. So that dries up our code a lot. We just got rid of 10 or so lines. So let's go back, save with our parentheses. Let's go to the browser and make sure it still works. So let's play a game. Click on play again, and it resets just fine. Let's click on easy, play another game, and it also resets just fine. All right, so we dried up our code quite a bit there. I'm going to get rid of these 2 just so you can see how much we shortened everything.